For the Minnesota Vikings, their community relations is much more than fan engagement. It's ensuring that all communities across Minnesota are connected, thriving, and positively impacted from a social impact, community engagement, and emotional wellness point of view. Furthermore, research from the University of Michigan demonstrates that professional sports teams are increasingly investing in local communities. By expanding programs in areas such as food security, small business development, and youth education and engagement, demonstrating community engagement and relations has become a strategic priority rather than simply a charitable initiative. In this episode of Let's Have This Conversation, I sit down with my friend Logan Johnson, who serves as the Director of Community Relations for the Minnesota Vikings, to explore how professional sports teams are working to strengthen and fortify their social impact within the communities they serve. By strengthening their relationships with fans, nonprofits, and other community stakeholders. Driven by a passion to create meaningful change through the vehicle of professional sports, Logan explains how the Vikings are exemplifying their commitment to put team first in their pursuit of excellence, continuous learning, fostering high-character individuals within their organization and throughout the Minneapolis community at large, with a focus on fostering diverse, equitable, and inclusive cultures which extend well beyond the football field during the season. Whether you're a sports executive, nonprofit leader, educator, a community program builder, community advocate, business professional, or someone who simply cares about making a difference in a positive fashion, this episode offers practical and useful insights into how leadership, collaboration, and service can transform communities one step at a time. And Johnson joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShan. Let's have this conversation. Logan, if you're ready, I'm super excited to be with you this morning to learn all about the important work you do in community relations for the Minnesota Vikings. It's great to see you, and happy Friday to you, my friend.
Happy Friday to you as well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Logan, I'm interested to start our conversation by you giving me sort of a 360-degree view of your job and the difference you're making in the Minnesota community. Because, a lot of people see the events that the community relations department puts on, but they don't understand a lot of the times about the background work that goes into it. So tell me about your job and what makes it so fabulous, my friend.
Yeah, so I'm the director of community relations here with the Vikings, and what that means is helping our players, coaches, and staff members really get involved in the community and use their platform to give back and create positive experiences for those around Minnesota and beyond. I consider myself very, very lucky for being able to do this work. I think that we have the best job in the building, and so excited to every day to be able to kind of find new ways to give back. And the way that we do that is you mentioned through events, but also working with the NFL through their league initiatives like Crucial Catch, which is kind of cancer awareness, Salute to Service, which is really based on uplifting our military, those who have served and those who are currently serving, and then Inspire Change, My Cause, My Cleats. All of these different things really help us kind of have a guideline for what we should be doing and how we can kind of help tell the stories of why our players are so engaged in the community and try to get them even more engaged. So it's a great job. I love it. There are definitely obstacles along the way, but consider myself very lucky every day to be able to do a job like this.
Absolutely, and I know as an organization, one of your core principles is centered around the concept of meaningful change through sports. So, what do you think that means in practice when we talk about meaningful and inspirational change through sports? What do you think that means, my friend?
Yeah, the nice part about that is I think that it can mean a lot of different things, but, depending on the event or the program that we help to run. Sometimes we are hosting programs to give out thousands of pairs of shoes to kids in need across the Twin Cities. And other times that's just one make a wish that we're helping to grant. So it can mean a lot of different things. And that's what I think is so fun about the job. And also can be so meaningful is it's hard to measure what that impact looks like, but it's something that you can change how impactful something is just based on the scale of it. And it doesn't mean one is better or worse than the other, but it's just really there's just a lot of different opportunities to give back and to create positive change, specifically through the use of the Vikings brand.
Yeah, absolutely. I know in your line of work, my friend, it's all about collaboration and building a sense of community trust and relationship. So my next question has to do with building a reputation of, collaboration, trust, and respect, and building relationships, because I know that's a big part of your job. So how does that look for you in terms of building a successful community foundation of relationships, trust, and respect, my friend?
Yeah, I think that is just what you mentioned of building relationships and finding ways to connect with people, whether it be internal, whether it be our players, whether it be community partners. What are the things that kind of drive and motivate them? And then what are the best ways that they find to communicate on a daily basis or just connect? And it doesn't always have to be work related, So I think that's something that is really important to us and our team. And the stronger relationships that you have, the more that you can get done, the more honest conversations that you can have. And really that's I think what it comes down to is like being honest, being transparent about everything that you can accomplish. I think that not only saves everybody a bunch of time and energy, but it also can start to get to the root of how can we truly, make a positive impact in one area or another if we're, having these honest, meaningful conversations and can trust each other to be upfront about everything like that.
Yeah, no, that each city in the NFL has a different set of priorities from a community relations standpoint. So I'm curious for you in Minnesota, what's the sort of roadmap you go through in determining where you're going to deploy your community relations resources, and what sort of criteria do you go through when making those sorts of decisions, my friend?
Yeah, we work with the NFL to determine what those league initiatives or those programs might be. So I mentioned before all the different league initiatives and the community things that you might see show up throughout the NFL season. A lot of that is branded on the sidelines or, they have TV spots about that. And we help kind of tell that at the club level as well and connect our players to those. But then deeper than that, we try to find consistent community programming and events that our players find meaningful. So that can be something that has nothing to do with any of those league initiatives, but it's something that a player is very passionate about. And if they come to us and tell us that they want to do something, that is any sort of community involvement, we're going to say yes to that, and we're going to do our best to get involved and support them. So it's balancing a little bit of what that league calendar looks like, but then also the passions and the priorities of our players when it comes to the community work that they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Logan, as you both know, we both know that Minnesota has a rich history of hockey. It's actually called the state of hockey, but I know that football culture also runs deep in the state. So, from your perspective, what makes the Vikings fan base and broader football community so unique, my friend, from your perspective?
Yeah, they're super passionate fans, very, very passionate fans. Love their Vikings. And you're right, it is called the state of hockey. But I feel that the passion for the Vikings is right up there with any of the hockey fans that we have here in the state. A lot of them overlapping. And that passion does bleed over into the community work, and they're super supportive of all of the players and what they want to do in the community, and that's a really cool thing to see. I think Minnesota, it's just one of those places that it's not just the Twin Cities. And I think that's super important to people around the state. And that's something that we try to do to prioritize on our end to make sure that we're not just, focusing on the Twin Cities. That's a huge part of what we do, obviously, but it's not just the Twin Cities that we're focusing on. We also want to recognize those fans out of state. And we know that there's a lot of people doing great work outside of the Twin Cities. So whatever we can do to help amplify those stories when it's a good fit, we certainly make time to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Logan, I know that the Minnesota Vikings recently hosted a Special Olympics, and having cerebral palsy myself, inclusion and diversity is a big part of what I like to champion. And I'm curious to ask you, from a diversity perspective and an inclusion perspective, how do you break down those barriers to inclusion? And I'm sure the Special Olympics and hosting that goes a long way, doesn't it?
Yes, I would say so. I mean, representation matters in whatever you're doing. And obviously that's at the forefront in community work. And, you brought up the Special Olympics USA Games. We are very, very close partners with Special Olympics Minnesota here at the local level. But we had the opportunity to work very closely with Special Olympics USA Games when they came here to the Twin Cities. It was a ton of fun. It was a great opportunity to get the organization involved. We had a lot of different players get involved at a personal level, devote a lot of their time and energy to helping out those athletes and uplifting those athletes. And it was very, very impactful for, I would say, everybody that was a part of it. And that's something that's not going to go away for us when we have our relationship with Special Olympics. And that will just continue to grow here at the local level, but then I'm sure nationally to some degree as well. So yeah, that was a really great opportunity, something that we were very grateful to be a part of for Special Olympics USA Games. They do a great job of hosting that event for so many athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also interested to ask you about the role that the concept of resilience plays in community relations. Because for me, just to give you a little background about myself, Logan, I was born with cerebral palsy, and I found out at the age of 9 that I wouldn't be able to walk for the rest of my life without assistance. But I believe that everyone's portrait of success is different, and I'm curious from a community relations standpoint, how do you woven in the concept of resilience and really getting the Minnesota community to rally around a common cause, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, you're a great example of resilience. So, your story is fantastic. So, and good for you for what you've been able to build in terms of your media success here. And again, why I'm grateful to be asked to be a part of it. But yeah, I think the resilience for me that we see is through our community partners and through those people that we can help uplift. But truthfully, it's like I think a lot of people look at our players as these superheroes, and to some degree, they have a very, very difficult job, that's for sure. But 9 times out of 10, the person with that has a difficult or more difficult job is that community group or that person that we're helping to host. Some of the stories that we run across, I mean, these kids especially are going through so much, and the way that their families are able to kind of be resilient in what to me looks like such a tough situation is so inspiring, and I know it is for our players as well. So it's kind of interesting to think about, because I think that so many players that you know we work with and that we have the ability to bring these community groups to, they're the ones that are truly impacted by any community groups or special guests that we may have, because that's the person that's really going through something, and if our players and our team can help to provide a brief, moment of happiness or a great positive memory, absolutely, that's what we want to do. But they're really the ones that deserve all the credit. They're the champions out there that are every day is not easy, but they continue to persevere, and that's the true definition of resilience, I think, that we see every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a community relations standpoint, I'm curious, how do you measure the return on an investment when you do a community relations initiative? Because after all of the NFL teams and clubs are businesses at the end of the day. So, from a community relations standpoint, how do you measure return on investment, my friend?
Great question. Something we talk about a lot. It is difficult to measure, and I think it's tough to measure in terms of dollars spent or anything like that. I think I touched on it earlier, but it's tough to measure even in regards to uh, number of people impacted for one event versus another, game day experience that we might provide for one family. So it's something that really is hard to define on our side. And thankfully we have an internal team. We have a great analytics, business analytics team that helps us kind of, identify goals that we might have, and how can we reach those. So I think we're really, our measure of success is kind of defined by the goals that we have each and every year. And those can change, but I would say it's really hard to put any sort of tangible numbers or measurements on that type of, like how are we making a difference? I think it can be in the programming year after year and the events that we host year after year. And then how are we making those better? So if a lot of times we're doing repeat events and those are great, but how are we finding ways to improve those every single year? That could be adding more people to it to impact more people, or it could be making sure that it's a more impactful event for maybe less people. So I think that's something that we talk about every single year, and it's just, we can't get complacent in anything that we're doing, and we just try to make everything better year after year. So I don't know if that fully gave you the answer, but that's kind of how we look at things.
Yeah, absolutely. And Logan, I used to work at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and one of the sayings in my office was that we get more done when we collaborate. And I know when you run a community relations initiative as an NFL team, it takes all departments from HR to operations, every department that works for the team. So I'm curious, how do you coordinate every department around a common cause when you decide to do a community relations initiative, my friend?
Yeah, it's hard to involve everyone, but the nice part about our job is that our community relations department does touch a lot of different areas of the organization, and that's one of my favorite parts of the job. We get to work with so many different people, whether it's on the football side or our partnerships team, our sales team, the public relations crew. So we have a lot of different opportunities to work with different people around the organization, but there are some that we naturally don't work with all that much. I think one thing that we try to do is, whenever we have some of those big programs or those big league initiatives that we want to activate, we do the best we can to involve our entire staff. So every year we provide some sort of staff give back piece. So, a couple years ago, that was a custom football. This was all internal, but it was just a custom football that had the name of somebody that was close to that person affected by cancer, whether it was somebody that they lost that was close to them, somebody that's currently battling, whatever it is, and that's something they could keep at their desk. They could gift to that person. It was completely up to our internal staff member, and that's not something we publicize, but it's important to us to try to connect our staff to some of the community programs that we're doing when it's appropriate. And there's a few different touch points that we have throughout the year. We try to make sure our staff is involved with. We do a Special Olympics unified team that we go to a different visiting. We go to an away opponent every single year to play a different unified program. That's something that we get our staff involved in at various levels. We take veterans on a trip every single year. That's something that we try to get our staff involved with in telling their story as kind of a staff send-off as well. So they're kind of little things, but we have seen that it really truly does affect our staff in a positive way, and something that they really enjoy being a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you and I both know, winning on the field obviously helps when you're wanting to engage a community in terms of community relations initiatives. So tell me, how does winning on the field from a competitive level help with community relations initiatives, my friend?
Well, you know that winning is just, it's the ultimate, it sets the vibe in the building, so it really does, like, create a more positive atmosphere around the building. And when you're not winning as much, sometimes that atmosphere is a little bit, I don't know, tampered down, I would say. But the really nice part about our locker room, we have such great representatives, community representatives in the locker room when it comes to our players. I've noticed over my time here that there, even in those down seasons, we have players that are willing and want to give back to the community. So really just kind of finding those and making sure that we take advantage of their interest and want to do that. But I can't lie to you, when we're winning and when we're rolling on the field, it certainly is easier to ask them for different community events, or certainly easier to get them involved. So absolutely, it makes a difference. But we are lucky regardless. We have such a great locker room, great coaching staff that really do a great job of getting in the community regardless. So it plays a factor, but maybe not as much as what it would maybe for other organizations, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when a community rallies around an initiative, I'm curious, for you as the community relations director, how do you know it really goes beyond the brand of the Vikings? And what I mean by that is, how do you know when you go through a community relations initiative that the impact will be felt after the pomp and circumstance has ended, my friend? Because I know for you it's all about making sustainable impact beyond the initial point of contact. So how do you do that in practice, my friend?
Yeah, a lot of times it's testimonials, and that's a lot of times from the relationships that you build. So, one example, just the other night, I got a text. There's a group of us on our team that got a text actually from the mom of a Make-A-Wish recipient that we had last year, and Justin Jefferson helped to grant a Make-A-Wish request for a lot of different kids actually. But this one in particular had reached out to us just to provide an update on her child, and that's the kind of thing. I mean, that was from a year ago that we had that first interaction, and that we were able to grant the wish. So that type of thing goes a long way and means a ton to me, to be able to see that that's still making an impact with her son. That those are tough to, again, it's kind of a tough thing to quantify, but it really is like one of the most meaningful things that we can have to see that impact and see how powerful it was, even so far after the actual event or the weekend that we were able to have with him.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know that the Vikings have a rich history of alumni, and, I know that you use every inch of your organizational history to make a difference in the community. So I'm curious, how does your alumni help you reconnect with generations of fans, my friend?
Yeah, it's our so in the NFL, if you've played on an active roster for, I believe it's a year, you're automatically considered an NFL legend. And so our Vikings Legends department, we have a crew of people that help run our Legends department. They do a phenomenal job. They're the best in the business. And when they're able to really find meaningful ways for those legends to get involved. It's very cool to see when we go out to different community events or whenever we're out, just with different groups of fans, to see the way that some of those legends resonate with different generations of fans is incredible. I mean, we can have a community guest that might be a kid, under the age of 10, and they might not know who a certain Vikings legend are, but their parents will. And we've had so many examples of that. And it's very cool to see that it's, helping to make an impact, not necessarily for that kid that was specific to it, but for the parents that are a part of it. Because whenever we have, any sort of community guest or family out, we want to make sure that it is very family focused and everybody does have that kind of positive experience. So that's just another way that we can add to it. And our legends are also great ambassadors for the organization. They're fantastic. I've gotten to know a lot of them, on a personal level, and they're just really great guys. And we're lucky to have such a loyal, kind of group of former players that are still around the Twin Cities area.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I want to go back to the inspired change thing for just a second, because I know that social justice is a big part of something that is deeply important to your players, particularly after the George Floyd incident and all of the rest of the social justice change stuff that occurred because of that. So I'm curious, how has your social justice or inspired change initiative changed or evolved since that incident and beyond, my friend? What are your thoughts on the unique sort of space that the Vikings hold from a social justice and community standpoint? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, social justice is an incredibly important element of what we do for community programming. We actually had a social justice committee prior to 2020, when the George Floyd murder happened in the Twin Cities. So we actually had an established group of a social justice committee prior to that. And we were able to act fairly quickly when there was just a lot of unrest in the Twin Cities at that time. So we were able to act quickly and be able to kind of represent for our players, try to put them in the best position to kind of give back and use their voice. And that's continued today. It changes in the iteration of who, what players are a part of our social justice committee, but thankfully our organization has always been super behind that. We've donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to various nonprofits, uplifting communities of color throughout the years. So that's completely up to our players and how they determine that funding. We were just talking about it the other day of how we're going to go about it this year, and we're really excited for a lot of the progress that we can make there. But our players remain very committed to that. That has not changed, and it's cool to see kind of their creativity and how they want to give back in that space, because it is such an important initiative, and one that our entire organization, when it comes to ownership, head coach, GM, and then our players are very passionate about. And then it's our job to kind of help bring that to life a little bit. So obviously there's always work to be done, but it's a pillar that we have very high priority around it.
Yeah, and Logan, during the season, there are a lot of demands on players' time. So I'm curious, from your perspective, how do you make sure that players are invested in community relations during the season, so that their bandwidth of time isn't depleted when they have to go through community relations events? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, it's a great question, and something that we balance delicately throughout the year. But I think it comes back to what you'd mentioned before about the relationships that you build with certain players. I mean, there are certain guys that we know want to know every community event that we're doing each week, and we'll make sure to tell them. And then there's others that is not necessarily the cadence that they want to be on, and that's completely fine. I mean, whenever we meet with players for the first time, we tell them, you're here to play football. That is your main job. But we think that you have a great opportunity to give back in the community. And if you want to be a part of that, we are happy to get you involved. So it kind of starts there. And then we will ask guys what events they want to be involved in, invite guys to a lot of different events, and then start to feel it out from there of, all right, who is going to be kind of our go-tos to be at every event every week, and then who are some that we're a little bit more intentional about asking. And again, that's not any knock on those guys that aren't there every week, because that is a grueling schedule to go through for the season. So we're very cognizant of that and want to be sure that we're not asking too much of them ever. But again, we have such a great locker room that's rarely has been the case.
Yeah, and nothing goes on in an organization without the approval of ownership. And I know that for the Vikings, the Will family plays a big role in that. So I'm curious, what's the role that ownership plays in getting all of this done, my friend?
Yeah, they've always been incredibly supportive. Our ownership is, I could not ever say anything bad about the Vikings ownership and how they've treated our entire organization, but specifically our social impact and our community relations team. They're very, very supportive of all of our different community efforts. They want to be involved when they can. They're really, I think they look at it as, they really trust us. They give us autonomy to help make decisions about what's going on in the community, and they certainly trust our players, and they want to get behind our players when our players are passionate about something. And it's really, from my position, that's really all we can ask for, and we're very grateful to be in an organization that has such strong owners in that way.
Yeah, and Logan, I've got two questions left for you, and I'm going to combine them because they're interconnected. And I'm curious for you as an organization, community relations director. Players have performance goals that they want to reach, obviously, from wins and losses and all of that sort of thing. But from your perspective, for you personally, I'm curious, what is sort of your checklist of accomplishment you go throughout the year to make sure that you're really, and I know we talked about indicators earlier being hard to achieve and measure, but I'm curious from your perspective, what sort of a checklist do you go throughout the season or an off season to really measure the amount of work or impact you're making? And then just lastly, I'm curious about your own personal and professional legacy, my friend, and how you want that to be defined.
Yeah, as far as measurements throughout the year, I think, for us, it's how are we continuing. It's a lot of process driven things, I would say. And, a large part of our job is to make sure that everybody's organized internally when we go about hosting a different community event. So for us, we always lead with impact first. So how are we creating the biggest and best impact that we can with any given community event in any given space? So it starts there. But then we want to be efficient about how that's planned and how that's executed. So a lot of times that's the PR team involved with our how the communications go out. It's our content teams and how the story is told, and then it can be our partnerships team and how we engage a corporate partner to help us with that. So I think that it kind of comes down to, are we doing our job to make sure that all of those things are handled and easy as it can be on everybody else, and then also collaborative to what you mentioned before. And from a legacy perspective, I think that just I want to be a part of a team that continues to give back and prioritize those community initiatives and does so in the right way. I think there is the opportunity for us to always connect players more to their community here. We want to be able to do that the best we can, and really just to be a part of the team that we have currently. I'm very, very lucky to be a part of this and want to just continue to make the biggest impact that we can in the Twin Cities and beyond. So, I don't know that I have anything like, specific, and it's all very team oriented in terms of how we can get our job done, and then whatever impact we can make and legacy we can leave.
Yeah, and I have one final follow-up because it just came to my head. I'm curious because I know that the Minnesota winters can be kind of unique, my friend. So from a community relations standpoint, I'm curious, First of all, how do you survive a Minnesota winter? And how do you use it to your advantage from a community relations standpoint, my friend?
Yeah. Um,
Oh,
layers. That's how you survive. That's how you survive. There's a lot of layers. An automatic car starter is helpful too. But yeah, it's that's how you survive it in terms of leaning into it on our end. I think that we just really try to activate around the holidays, and then there's a lot of people in need around the Twin Cities, and sometimes that comes to that's a little bit more noticeable around the wintertime. And so that's something that we try to do too, whether it be different, like coat giveaways that we're a part of, or, holiday initiatives. So really kind of leaning into the different seasons and how we can give back and benefit in those areas. And, starting with the question of like, working with our nonprofits of what do you need? What are the things that you need and how can we best help with that? That would probably be the best answer that I can give there. But I will say Minnesota winters get a bad rap, and they can be bad at times. But layers, you do layers, you're fine. Also, then the summers are great.
yes, yeah. Well, I have to make it down to Minnesota to meet you in
Yeah,
person, my friend. And
absolutely, that would be great.
but I won't come in December. I promise. I'm only kidding. Hey, Logan, if people want to get involved with the Vikings Community Relations Department or contact you personally, what's the best way they can do that, my friend?
Yeah, I'm not a big social media guy, but I would encourage you to go to Vikings.com. Go check out our community page. We do have a community Instagram account, Vikings in the Community. We'd love to get engagement there. And that's where you can find a lot of our timely updates on what we've been doing and really highlight the great work that our players are doing, a lot of which goes unnoticed, really. And they deserve all the credit in the world because they do a great job and really do a fantastic job of bringing positive experiences to, especially kids in need around the Twin Cities. And yeah, we're very proud of that.
Well, that's why you told me that you have the best job in the organization, right?
Agree.
Uh,
Yes, yes,
uh,
absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, Logan, I really enjoyed our time together this morning and learning more about how you make a measurable and impactful difference within the community in the Twin Cities and in Minnesota. My friend, your time on my behalf and your efforts in the community on behalf of the Vikings are most appreciated. And I want to thank you for being here this morning. It's most appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Kevin. I appreciate you having me. And yeah, it was fun talking to you.